Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today at this sacred temple on the planet StreamYard to open our hearts and once again fall in love with the galaxy far, far away. To reach out and welcome the cosmic energies of the universe into our bodies, flowing through us and binding us together. To embrace the ways of the light side by working together and being at peace with all living things, to listen to the will of the Force rather than trying to manipulate and corrupt the Force to our wills, for that is the way of the dark side, and also bad faith actors on the internet. So let us all gather around the meditation circle, take a deep breath, and welcome positive energies into this room of fanboy conversation and thematic discussion as we begin our podcasting journey. No, continue our podcasting journey into Reconnecting with the Force. Welcome to the show, everybody. Case, unmute yourself. My name is Nico Regoli, Nico Suave Regoli, Nico Furioso, Nicholas Starheart, whatever you want to call me. And this is my show, Reconnecting with the Force. It is a podcast where I'm watching all of Star Wars movies and television in chronological order according to Wikipedia's canon section of Star Wars. And we are on our second discussion talking about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the first movie entry chronologically into the Skywalker Saga. I'm joined by a man who I've done many a podcasts with in my day. Case Cornelese, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. I just had a nice nap, and I'm ready to get into this movie. Um, been looking forward to this. I wanted to be on for the first one, but I couldn't because I was on vacation. But now I'm back, so I'm here, ready to do this one now.
For those of you who don't know, I have a lot of European friends who love Star Wars, and it's kind of hard to work around their schedule sometimes. And Thursday night might not have been the best night for them. So don't be surprised if we experiment in the first couple weeks with like what days and times we end up streaming this podcast. But I did want Case as part of this. Yes, weekends. I did want Case on this particular discussion simply because he is a big racing fan, and the Phantom Menace does have some racing elements to it. We may also be joined by another friend of ours, Jay Burns. He has not seen our messages yet, but hopefully he will be on within the next couple minutes or within the next half hour to hour or so. But we'll keep you posted on that. But for now, Case, let's since you're one of the newest panelists to appear on screen, give us your insight as to how your Star Wars journey began and where you are right now in that journey.
Well, the thing is, like yourself, there was a time in the time that I've been a Star Wars fan that I kind of fell out of love with the franchise for a little bit, and I also needed to reconnect or like find my new spark. But initially, I got into Star Wars through the Indiana Jones movies. Actually, my mom was not a fan of the Star Wars movies, but she was a big fan of the Indiana Jones movies. She introduced me to that. Then we rented the Blu-ray DVDs, I should say, from the video store, and I watched the special features off of that. And in the special features of the Indiana Jones movies, they kept talking about how George and Harrison kept working with each other because they were like, we already did this with American Graffiti and Star Wars. So I heard a lot about Star Wars in that, and I was like interested to see. And then I remember one day, the babysitter that I had at the time rented Empire Strikes Back from the video store, and he watched it when I was there as well. That was my first Star Wars movie that I saw, and I just remember that it looked cool. It looked interesting. I didn't really know what it was about, but I was entertained, and I was thinking like, hey, maybe I should watch more of this. So at the time, we had 5 Star Wars movies. Attack of the Clones had just released. Revenge of the Sith was about to release, and I watched the original trilogy. I watched it so many times, and the prequels a lot as well. And at the time, because I was still a kid, I really liked the prequels, and I really enjoyed that. I watched that. Then Revenge of the Sith came out. Watched that one a lot, and just I watched it a lot. Played the games, a lot of the games at the time, like Lego Star Wars, Battlefront, that kind of stuff. And then we had the Clone Wars movie in 2008. I saw it in the theater. That's technically my first movie, Star Wars movie that I saw in the theater, and I really didn't like it.
Mine too. Mine
Yeah.
too.
But I really didn't like it, which caused me not to watch the Clone Wars TV series. Years later, I figure out that it's actually really good, and I should have watched it a lot earlier. But like the Clone Wars movie, kind of put me off to that. But yeah, then a couple of years later, I had watched the movies more. I had played the games some more, but I still was just not into the Clone Wars. But then I watched all of the Clone Wars. I'm not the biggest fan of the Clone Wars. I'm a big fan of certain episodes, but just not all of the Clone Wars. Especially the first season, in my opinion, is a bit wonky. Like it takes a while for it to really find its footing, but when it gets going, it gets really good. But yeah, I was still not entirely convinced, and I needed a new spark. That spark for me was The Force Awakens. To me, the way that The Force Awakens brought us back to the Star Wars universe, I thought was awesome. I fell in love with it again because The Force Awakens not only caused me to watch that movie specifically 15 times in the theater at the time. I had like an unlimited card. I could just go to the theater whenever I could, and it was Christmas vacation, so it's like I can go whenever I feel like. But also, it made me watch Rebels. It made me buy the books and the comics, which now I'm a little behind on, but I did read a lot of it. So that made me a bigger Star Wars fan than I ever was. I was very much into it at the time. And I really loved it. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I still watch everything that they release in terms of movies and in terms of TV shows. Not as into the stuff with the books and the comics anymore, but I try to do as much as I can because I really love the franchise.
Okay, that was a very, very lengthy explanation as to where you are in your Star Wars journey. Folks, this is where I tell you that both of us are autistic. So if you ask what time it is, we will tell you how the watch is made. That's essentially essentially where we fall on the neurodiversity scale.
I just wanted people to get a good explanation as to where it comes from with me.
Of course, I understand completely. Before we get into the main discussion of the show, and also before we read out the rules of what this podcast is all about, I just want to give a shout out to the various Twitch followers we got over the past week since this podcast began that I did not give any love to last week because I was so focused on the broadcast that I couldn't really pay attention to those things. And also, StreamYard for some reason doesn't let you see what followers you are getting on Twitch. You have to actually go to the Twitch dashboard of the stream to see that for yourself. So shout out to Sinister Alec 27, JPEC 1098, Richard Hero, who was in the chat last week, my other account, Nicholas Starhart, you Case 247, and oh dear God, Midget Empire. Thank you for all the follows there. That's a very interesting screen name. I wonder who is behind that screen name. But anyway, as we now let's get into the rules of what this podcast is all about. Thank you, Case, for making this little overlay here so that we can go into detail of it. Rule number 1, every piece of Star Wars lore / history that you dislike, for every piece of Star Wars lore / history that you dislike, think about another piece of Star Wars lore / history out there which you may love that may justify the existence of that thing you dislike. Rule number 2, there are people who have given their heart and soul to making Star Wars content. Whether or not you like their work, they are still incredibly passionate and creative people. Be considerate of their feelings when discussing their work, especially with regard to any actors who got bullied off of social media for a certain amount of time. Rule number 3, there are multiple ways to tell a story. There are multiple stories to be told, and they all have a place in Star Wars. Rule number 4, opinions aren't facts. Instead of saying with all your chest, this is good / bad, just say, this is / isn't for me, or my take on it is ... Rule number 5, Star Wars is a fictional depiction of real life. These aren't just action flicks. There are pieces of art within with themes, messages, and life lessons that are there to teach us to be better people. Rule number 6, Star Wars is also a fictional depiction of real life with characters named Savage Opress, Dr. Quadpa, and I'm a gun guy. Things with serious messages in them can also be silly at the same time. Rule number 7, all spoilers are fair game. We are going to talk as if the panelists and the viewers / listeners of the show have all seen everything Star Wars. And number 8, my favorite rule of them all, if Ki-Adi-Mundi says something out loud, always assume he's somehow factually incorrect. There are the rules.
But Nico, what about the droid attacking the Wookiees?
That's factually correct. There was a droid attack on the Wookiees, and it was the perfect ploy for Palpatine to execute Order 66. So basically, we are going through this whole theme in my mind that Ki-Adi-Mundi is responsible for the demise of the Republic.
Probably.
Yes. So
I do think he's just the embodiment of the hubris that the Jedi had at the time.
And you can see it very, very easily in this movie that we're about to talk about. So I guess we should get into the actual discussion of this movie now. I'll just go beat by beat. So we start off with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Yes, the opening crawl. I don't have it in front of me. If you have the notes written down in front of you, you're welcome to read the crawl out loud.
I don't. I just have notes on it, because a lot of people start criticizing this movie with the opening crawl because the opening crawl is a bit weird, at least in the view of a lot of people. Because it starts off saying that there's taxation of trade routes and all that kind of stuff, and kids will not be able to really understand what's going on in that opening crawl. The thing is that, I can see the idea that George Lucas had, and that's what this movie is a lot about. George Lucas had full creative control. He had a lot of ideas. He wanted to put a lot of it in the movie, and the execution is, well, that's the question if you like the execution or not. But the opening crawl starts with a lot of political info that you might be like, wait, is that really what we need to know right now? Probably not. It also goes back that George Lucas was heavily helped with writing the opening crawl for the first movie, because he needed to rewrite it entirely. His wife helped him in that regard. And you can clearly see that he had full creative control here. He could just write whatever he wanted. Did it work? Oh.
Which reminds me, this movie is written and directed by George Lucas.
Solely, completely.
It came out in 1999. What was it, 13 years after, maybe even more? I can't remember.
Well, it was 16 years after Return of the Jedi.
16 years.
Of course, a couple of years before this movie released, they had re-released the original movies as the special edition. Late 90s.
Which reminds me, there are 3, possibly 4 versions of this movie. There's the original theatrical release. There's the VHS release. There's the DVD release, which is a special edition in its own right. And then you have the other special edition of the Blu-ray release, which I believe came out in 2011, which is now forgive me if the year is wrong for that Blu-ray, but I do know that is the version that appears up on Disney Plus, which is what I watched in preparation for this podcast, because before that version, all I had was the DVD. So I still had the one with the weird Yoda puppet. which I'm going to talk about in jest when we get to that point.
Yeah.
But this is the one where they've updated some stuff with CGI, and added a few extra lines here and there. And I think the only time I've seen this one before, or bits and pieces of this version before, was I think on TNT back when like TNT still had the rights to air Star Wars movies on their channel before everything sort of went back to Disney officially, and they could just like keep it on their stuff. Anyway, we're getting into the little nit and gritty. Basically, trade routes, taxation. In a way, you could kind of compare it to like, Boston Tea Party sort of thing. This is where the infighting is beginning. But yeah, there's been some issues with trade routes. The Trade Federation is establishing a blockade. The Chancellor has sent 2 ambassadors to negotiate the end of that blockade. What the Chancellor didn't disclose was, hey, the ambassadors are Jedi Knights. You might want to do what they say, because otherwise things will end badly for you. Anyway,
the Jedi Knights, I believe. I knew it.
Says
they are here to force the settlement. Sorry.
I mean, the dialogue is very much accurate. That is what they were there to do, is to cause a settlement, and doesn't really get to that point. The Trade Federation. We talked a lot about characters who are desperate, making desperate choices on last week's discussion, and in a sense, like the Trade Federation, specifically Viceroy Newt Gunray, is very desperate to keep the power that he has at this moment. And so he's making the desperate choice to follow through on what Darth Sidious, who we later know as the Emperor in the future, but Darth Sidious is like, get rid of the Jedi, kill them. And so it's like, send the droid in to give them drinks, and then gas. All just poisonous gas, and that didn't work. So then they get it. So then they end up fighting the battle droids. We see a display of rare Jedi super speed, and when the
which never really seems to come back in any of the other movies.
They did sort of bring it back for the 2002 2D animated Clone Wars thing that's not canon.
2003.
Okay, so it was 2003. But they did bring it back for that cartoon that's not canon. But for some reason,
reason is not canon. I don't know why. It could completely be canon. But
that's not what I was going to say. I was just going to say that for some reason, that super speed is never brought up again. And it was
especially at the end of the movie,
a whole lot more interesting.
Like especially at the end of the movie when they have these force fields that come up where Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan are fighting, and Darth Maul and Qui-Gon go all the way there, and Obi-Wan is just running regularly, and it's like, oh, he gets blocked, and then he starts to run, and then he gets blocked again by the last one. Like, super speed might have come in handy, but no, I suppose not.
In my head canon, I'm just going to imagine that about maybe like a microsecond of film got erased by mistake, and they just turned it into a happy accident where it looked like they were moving super fast. That's how I'm going to interpret it. Again, a lot of Star Wars is up to interpretation. That's how I'm going to interpret it. I'm amazed it doesn't get talked about enough, that particular moment there. But anyway, so they escape the droids, crawl through the vents, and they hide in two separate droid drop ships that are set to land on Naboo. So that's a summary of what's happened so far. Case, What are your thoughts here on
Well, one of the things that the movie does for the very first time in all of Star Wars is show that a lightsaber can cut through a door, which is something that they haven't really done in the original trilogy, and actually makes the original trilogy look a bit weird, because there are moments when like Luke and Vader are fighting and they're hitting like the fences, and it doesn't go through it. It doesn't just cut through it, even though it completely should, of course. Um, but yeah, in this one, it's like they close the blast doors, and Qui-Gon is like, "I'm gonna cut through you now," and that's like a really clever, creative way to use a lightsaber. That was the first time we saw that, so that was cool. I also like the design of the battle droids, most particularly the droidekas. We see droidekas, and we see them have these shield generators, and instantly you get like, okay, whenever droidekas show up, Jedi have an issue fighting them. So that's cool. That's an interesting design that they have, and I think that just a whole lot of designs that they made for this movie are very creative, actually, and it's some of the stuff that is really underrated, but just the look and the sound of everything that they made for this movie, it has a very unique look to it. Like the moment that you see the Federation battle cruiser, like a globe inside a like a donut, you instantly recognize that. And also, yeah, the design of the battle droids, the design of the drop ships, even, and the design of the ship, like the tanks coming out on the surface of Naboo. It all has a very distinct look to it, and you remember it. And I think that's some of the stuff that a lot of people don't give credit to, because it's stuff that people really needed to think about. And I think, like, regardless if you like the movie or not, you can ask anyone what, like, you can show them a picture. What is this? And they can instantly say, "Oh, that's a droideka," or "That's a Trade Federation ship." They'll know that.
Okay. Since we're talking about technology, we mentioned this on last week's discussion, but the Republic sure does love the dark red and white scheme for their ships. We see it with the freighter that our two Jedi main characters come in on. It's one of my favorite Lego sets I've ever had. It's been taken apart long since, but it was heavy too, really heavy. But it's a lovely ship. I like that after the first three movies basically had no female pilots whatsoever. The captain of this ship happens to be a woman.
Can I correct you? Two female characters in the first three movies. We see three female characters. That's it.
Damn it, George. Anyway, no, I don't want this to be a podcast where we shit on the creator. He was obsessed with the technology. Sometimes he forgot about the people. You like what you like sometimes. But there was the wherewithal to, like, hey, the galaxy's a lot broader than we've made it out to be. Let's have a female captain of the ship. Granted, she dies instantly because they blew up the ship. Yeah, they did not get those shields up in time. Also, and I might be jumping ahead slightly with this point here, but I do like that with Star Wars in the prequel era, they made a habit of making sure that if a droid or a clone was yellow, they were a commander. If a droid or clone was red, they were a captain. There was that color symmetry with the rankings of these officers, and I like that. Even though it was two sides of different two sides of a coin here, they both kept those similarities there. Because I know George was very big on color symbolism. Like I know whenever Mark Hamill talks about being a part of Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, and Kevin Smith asked him, "Hey, can we do this little Star Wars parody here?" George Lucas was like, "Hey, remember, good lightsabers are green, bad lightsabers are red." And then they had the bong sabers, which was a nice little touch. Anyway, so
that was also something that I also picked up on this viewing. It's very little mentioned, but at one point, at the very start, Qui-Gon mentions the living force. The first time he mentioned that, it was very much a question like, what is he talking about? Isn't it just the force? Later in the Clone Wars, we get more of an explanation to that, because then we see, then we get an explanation that the living force is the one people who are alive right now, and the cosmic force are the people who've passed on but still live on as like force ghosts.
And
But that's
Qui-Gon is one of the best people to know anything about that, considering we kind of know how he ends up.
well,
Like
yeah, he is the first actually.
he's the first canonical Force ghost. Like we see countless examples of it in the newer Star Wars stuff. And I mean, he's always been very in tune with nature, and especially considering like growing up in Coruscant, where there was barely any plants whatsoever. We're going to talk about this next week when we talk about Tales of the Jedi. But like Qui-Gon, the one tree he ever saw around the Jedi Temple, he developed a giant connection to. So he cares about life. He cares about preserving it in a sense, and that's kind of why he also cares about that life that he has with Jar Jar. But the further along we get with our talks of the Trade Federation and Viceroy Gunray, we're gonna be hearing Lando Calrissian's famous words of "this deal is getting worse all the time" playing in our heads, because
Yeah.
they signed up for something, and the deal keeps changing on them into something that just spells more and more disaster for them. But
Oh,
anyway, so I'll go ahead.
oh yeah. At one point, they cut off communications to the planet. They, of course, invade the planet with all the armies, and that's probably my favorite piece of score in the movie. Like, I know everyone is gonna say it's Duel of the Fates, and I'm like, I respectfully disagree. My favorite piece of score of this movie, particularly, is the moment that they land, the droid invasion. I think it's a really cool score that George Lucas made, and I think that's a bit of an underrated piece.
You know what? You're right. It is a very underrated piece, and it's kind of set up by some words to Obi-Wan that I just want to mention here. He says, "You were
Oh.
right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short," and
The
that's
no,
just a
the
sign of.
negotiations never took place.
I mean, that line is just embolic of how great Ewan McGregor is. Like he's the main reason people. For the people who hated the prequels, he was the main reason they kept coming back, and for the people who love the prequels, he's also a greater reason why they keep coming back, because he's just the best.
Mm.
He cares so much, and like he brought life to that character in a way that Alec Guinness couldn't, and that needs to be commended.
Well,
But
Alec
anyway,
Guinness never really cared about the character in the first place.
fair enough, and that's an interesting contrast in and of itself. That
Yeah.
the first guy to play Obi-Wan Kenobi gave zero fucks. He was just like, "I'm 80 years old. I'm in this for a paycheck."
60.
Uh, well, he
That not
never
that
mind then.
old.
Okay, my bad there. My bad. But Ewan McGregor, he went the total opposite route. He's like, "This is a cool character. I want to give it all kinds of life," and
And he still portrays it to this day.
Exactly. But anyway, so they land on the Naboo. Qui-Gon is going one way. Obi-Wan has kind of gone another way. They'll eventually join up. But this is where we get Qui-Gon running through a stampede, and he sees the lovable idiot we all know as Jar Jar Binks. And you know what? I
and
shouldn't
and
call him
and,
an idiot because
and this is the point of the movie where a lot of people are like, "Oh God, what are we doing?"
And you know what? I shouldn't call Jar Jar an idiot, because he actually proves himself to be very capable as the content goes on throughout this period of Star Wars. It's just a matter of whether or not you saw it and you saw him being as capable as he has shown himself to be. But anyway, Jar Jar is about to get run over by a tank, which is kind of funny to think about because the tank has no wheels and it's floating So it's like, how can you get run over by a tank like that? But anyway, Qui-Gon basically pounces on Jar Jar, saves him from getting hit and or crushed and or I don't know, but basically like he gets him out of the way of the tank,
By the
and
way,
then Jar
the
Jar's
tank
like,
moves really slowly. I think even if it would have hit him, Jar Jar wouldn't have been that in that much trouble. I feel.
it is a little bit reminiscent of Michael McDonald in that one Austin Powers movie where he gets run over by a steamroller that's like moving at 2 miles an hour.
Yeah, kind of right.
But anyway, so he saves Jar Jar. Jar Jar says thank you. Um, we get a bit of the accent and the dialect, and you know what? I'm every culture has their own dialect, has their own traditions, and that's Star Wars showing that the galaxy is very vast, and
Yes.
it we I mean it's evident in Andor recently, where we had those two aliens on Narkina 5, I believe the planet is called, the prison planet, where after Cassian had just escaped, uh, uh, they get caught in the fishing net by those two aliens, and they're
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
They have their own unique dialect, but you see that, that's just their dialect. That's just how they talk. And
Yeah.
Jar Jar and the Gungans, this is how they talk. This is how they communicate, and they walk a little differently. They talk a little differently, but they still have intelligence. And they still have a culture, and that culture should be respected. And
Yeah.
Jar Jar is like Jar Jar is the lovable oaf of his people, but
Wow. It's questionable.
but he still shows himself to be very reliable. He's a little hesitant to help the Jedi, and then the Jedi are like, "You realize those droids are going to blast us, grind us into pieces, and
And
just
blast us into
basically."
oblivion. Use that point is well seen. This way.
Yep.
Sorry.
Follow me to the underwater city, where I'm technically banished, but anyway, we need the help no matter what. And
Yeah.
and the moment they arrive in the village, in Gunga City, they
To Gunga.
everyone
They
is like, "Oh shit, he's back! He's back!"
and he's brought some friends.
Yes, and they're not Gungans, so it's
Yeah.
like that. And it's at this point that we get sort of like a wipe that leads to a different council meeting from one we'll talk about later. The council of the bosses, I guess you could say. We've got Boss Nass and the rest of Gunga City's upper class. There, Jar Jar's in handcuffs. We find out that the Gungans don't feel very highly of the surface world. They
Nope.
feel like the surface world looks down upon them. Um, I mean, literally they do, because you live underwater, but figuratively, we have no evidence of that to back up that claim. That's just how they feel. And Qui-Gon and
They
Obi-Wan.
they say that they don't like the Naboo. What that is based on, I don't know, but they just say we no care about the Naboo. They just never care to bother with them.
From dialogue established later on in the movie, I think Boss Nass's reason is he thinks that the surface dwellers think they're above.
They're superior.
The Gungans. They think they're superior, and so therefore he feels he has no reason to respect them, and that's where the distrust comes in. And so Boss Nass wants them out of the city, and I had never noticed this before because of the way the camera was positioned, but apparently Qui-Gon is waving his hand as he's like, "Then speed us on our way." And we could use it. We could use transport.
We shall give you a bongo.
And I always just thought that Boss Nass was just like giving him that bongo because he's like, "I want you out of my city." So and because the way he goes right back into normal conversation when he's not doing the mind trick, it just I'm just thinking like maybe the mind trick didn't necessarily work on Boss Nass, and he was just like, I just want you guys to leave, so I'm gonna pretend like this is working and just give you what you want. Uh,
No,
it,
I don't think the Gungans are smart enough to resist the mind trick. They've probably never met a Jedi in their life. This is the first Jedi they ever meet, and yeah, I don't think their brain is too like smart for that. Personally, but it is a bit weird that he does use the mind trick if they, if yeah, that they clearly want him gone from there, them gone. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, of course. But the thing, like what you touched upon with the species of Jar Jar, and it's a complaint that this movie gets a lot by a lot of people, and I've never really agreed with it ever since I watched it as a kid, and I still don't really. Like people say that there are characters who seem racist, like the Nemoidians or Watto or Jar Jar, the Gungans. Like for some reason, the way they talk, the way they behave, seems racist, and I'm like, doesn't it make sense that some of the, like in a very fast giant universe of Star Wars with so many species all around, that doesn't it make sense that we get some real life caricatures from our world in there? To me, that always just made sense. I was never offended by Jar Jar. I was never offended by the Nemoidians. And I never really had an issue with Jar Jar. I'm probably one of the few people to say that. Like, I know a lot of people have an issue with Jar Jar. I don't really mind him all that much in this movie. Like, sure, he's an idiot. He makes his mistakes, but he does admit to it, He says at the very beginning, he's clumsy. He made these mistakes. And if anything, blame Qui-Gon for trusting him, for being like, oh, you're going to be with us for this entire movie now. And I'm going to take you everywhere that I go, even though he probably shouldn't have. But, well, that's Qui-Gon's decision. But I never had an issue with Jar Jar. I don't understand the hatred. And especially, I also think that Ahmed Best gave as good a performance as he could, especially considering this is the very first CGI motion capture character that we've had. Yes, this was before Gollum. A lot of people are going to say, but Gollum and stuff like, no, this came first. The Lord of the Rings movies came after this. Now, sure, Lord of the Rings was being filmed in the late 90s, so around the time that this movie was also being filmed. But that means that this movie couldn't really borrow all that much from Lord of the Rings because this movie didn't have any frame of reference. So this movie is known for creating our very first motion capture CGI character, and his name is Jar Jar Binks. Here we are.
Case is European. I'm American, so I'll just touch on where the racist comments could come in. And I'll just say like the way the way we first hear Jar Jar talk, I can see some comparisons that make sense being made to like a caricature of Civil War era slave language of like that may be how some like the way certain letters are left out of certain words or the pronunciation of the way certain things are said by Jar Jar, it could maybe be passed off as the way a slave would talk to their master in the Civil War era. That is the main credence. That's the main amount of validity I'll give those racism claims, because again, I want this to be a positive podcast, and I'm just saying like
Yeah.
I can see where the comparisons would be made. That being said, I feel like over time the Gungan species itself and also the portrayal of Gungans evolved in future Star Wars media to the point that it just sort of became their own culture and their own thing. And like, listen, the Ewoks are little murderous teddy bears.
Yes. They're awesome.
There's plenty of unique creatures and aliens and species in Star Wars, and they all have a place. They all have a place in this. Whether they're the most popular kid in school or the loser who gets pushed into the locker at school. Jar Jar at least starts out as that in a sense. Like he's the klutz. He's the guy who keeps stumbling into trouble. And, as this discussion about this movie goes on, we're going to see how he keeps sort of stumbling upwards as opposed to
Mm,
stumbling downwards. Like he
yeah.
stumbles literally into success. But anyway, they get the bongo. Qui-Gon is able to convince Boss Nass of like, hey, I saved Jar Jar's life. His life technically belongs to me now, which doesn't really help with the slave master relationship that I'm trying to avoid talking about. But anyway, um,
But here we are.
but anyway, Boss Nass is like, take him, be gone with him. He's your problem now. You deal with him. And they're like, okay. By the way, one point Obi-Wan made, which kind of touches upon last week's podcast discussion with the Ahsoka episode of Tales of the Jedi. Symbiotic relationship. Like Obi-Wan mentions that like what happens to the surface world will affect the Gungans as well. And much like how the way Ahsoka's mom was like, we only take what we need. To kill any more of the Kai Bucks would create an imbalance in the ecosystem of that village and the planet as a whole, and because of their connection with nature. So what happens to the surface will also happen to the underwater city. I mean, that's kind of the plot of Black Panther 2 also. of like
Yeah,
of like
yeah.
the yeah, of Namor and his people were so pissed off at the service world that they're like, you know what? Fuck these guys. They keep screwing up our ecosystem. Let's go after them now too. So it's like one of you can't touch one aspect of the planet without affecting the other, and that's the point they're making. Whether or
Yeah.
not they want to listen at this point in time in the movie is their problem. But
The thing is that they prove like he's proven to be right at the end of the movie, because at the end of the movie, the one of the droids comes up to Gunray and tells him like, we've begin our search of the underwater villages. If they're hidden, they won't stay hidden for long, and that's true. And then when they come back to Coruscant and they land, they like Jar Jar goes in and he's like, it's deserted, and they go to the place where they are hiding. So he was right.
but I also wanted to bring that up because it's our earliest example in canonical order of Obi-Wan Kenobi just being super headstrong and not afraid to speak up for what he believes in and what he believes is right. Like we
Being a
see
voice
countless
of reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why he developed the nickname of the negotiator, because he was like he could
Yeah.
always like just get his point across very well
Yep.
and make other people see his side. Now, granted, this is just his earliest attempt to try and be the negotiator, and it doesn't work as well as he maybe would have liked. Hence, why Qui-Gon had to step in, but he will get better at it over time. But anyway, they get in the bongo, they avoid a couple sea monsters, and
There's
then
always a
finally,
bigger fish.
yes, always a bigger fish. I think I even saw Qui-Gon when Jar Jar is about to have a panic attack. He uses a mind trick and says "relax," and Jar Jar just passes out, and that's why Obi-Wan says, "I think you overdid it,"
You
uh,
overdid it.
which
Yeah.
I never understood the context of what happened. But again, for some reason, with this viewing, I am seeing Qui-Gon moving his finger a lot more than I did in the DVD. So I don't know. Maybe it was just something that
Mm.
got cleared up in the Blu-ray version, or maybe I just wasn't paying well enough attention to it. But I'm seeing Qui-Gon moving his finger in a lot of places. I don't remember him waving his finger around. So the Jedi mind trick is very popular for him. But
Yeah.
anyway, we get to the capital city of Theed, um, where the queen is being escorted. By the way, we're going to talk about the fact that Naboo has an electoral monarchy system where they keep
Yeah,
electing
it's weird.
where they keep electing teenagers to office,
Yeah, it's weird.
and yet somehow this system works very fine for them.
I don't know. Thing is, I just like this is one of those things where I'm like, I want to stay away from this conversation because I think it could go south and I don't want to talk about it. What I do want to talk about is the world building. CGI world building in this movie is awesome. First of all, the Gunga city that we saw. Second of all, Feed. Just the way it looks is beautiful. It's magnificent. It's all done in CGI. Waterfalls, that kind of stuff, all done CGI, and it looks incredible. This was made in 1999. This was not made a few years ago. This was made when technology was very much still on the rise, and CGI was still like not entirely awesome yet. But honestly, the way that they were able to create these worlds with CGI looks phenomenal, honestly. And I think that Naboo is the biggest example of that in terms of the look of Theed and the look of the Gunga City.
It is one of the loveliest looking planets in earlier Star Wars production that I can think of. And for the sake of this conversation not going south, but still wanting to touch on it, I'll just say, like, maybe the benefit of electing teenagers to the position of queen is like they have a lot of young fire in their system, and they don't really have enough patience for bullshit, so they're just gonna do what they think is right in that moment, and boom. And you know what? They elected someone who's very headstrong and very strong-minded in Padme Amidala, or at least in this case, Sabe pretending to be Padme Amidala.
For most of the movie, and
Yes.
also Sabe tasking Padme to clean up R2 when Padme is the queen and she needs to do cleaning duties.
I mean,
Okay.
they're keeping up the illusion, but also I
Yeah.
bet Sabe was probably thinking, like, I'm gonna milk this here and there just to make the most of this opportunity, because I know what it's like to clean up those droids, and it's
I
not fun. Uh,
I think it was in the Red Letter Media review, either that one or another review for this one. It's like, when I'm acting as queen, I'm gonna make you clean up R2. When I'm queen, I'm gonna make you clean up the shit. That kind of stuff. Just like that, they all just have it out for each other. All the decoys, like, I'm gonna make you do that. I'm gonna make you do that.
in a way, it kind of reminds me of The Parent Trap and The Man in the Iron Mask, where you've got people pretending to be other people, in a sense. Also, now that I'm older, I can think of more about, like, why were they using that accent for the Queen? And now I kind of realize it's like to disguise the real voice, the real accent, so that you couldn't tell which was the decoy and which was the actual Queen. At least that's how I'm going to establish it in my own head canon of, like, they were so dedicated to trying to make sure no one could figure out who the real queen was, that they just all put on the same silly accent. Well, not silly, but the same disguised accent the entire way
Yeah,
through.
yeah, yeah. Like, I get it. They have like same very monotone voice. Um, does make her appear a bit wooden at times. People have complained about that. I'm okay with it. I think like it's what it is. You know, she needs to act as a queen, and then when she's Padme, the handmaiden, she's actually not that wooden. She actually acts a lot more emotional, caring, and that kind of stuff. Speaking of monotone, I did want to say one thing. This is the one time in all of canon, in all of Star Wars, that I like B1 battle droids, because they're still completely monotone, which I like. I really didn't like the fact that they decided to go more sarcastic, more human kind of voice, especially in the Clone Wars. This In this movie, I like them. It's like the one time I like them, and I've gone on podcasts before saying that I really don't like B1 battle droids in in all of canon, really. But this is like the one time that I do like them. Also, Attack of the Clones for most of the movie, because it really starts in Revenge of the Sith, and they were like, oh, people like the fact that they're slapstick, that kind of whatever. And I was just like, I don't like that. But they kept on with it, and that's why we have them being sarcastic in the entirety of the Clone Wars. Oh well.
I think I'm a little indifferent to it, though I can see the appeal of it for that one droid who's like, that doesn't compute. Oh wait, you're under arrest. Like that one droid is showing a sense of humor.
But
When
it's still monotone. it's not like he has no change in his voice, and that's what I like about it. But yeah, no, that's a moment where I'm like, okay, that's actually not too bad.
Anyway, we getting back on track here. The
Yes,
Jedi save the Queen and her entourage, including Captain Panaka. We got another black guy
one
in
of
the
the best
galaxy.
one of the best characters of this movie, by the way, completely underused.
Yes, and much like we said, oh, they introduced a female pilot. Now we have like a third black character in all of Star Wars lore here at this moment. Uh, before Mace Windu. I mean, that is the truth. This character was introduced before Mace Windu.
Yep.
And he is very good at this role.
Yeah.
Captain Panaka was a very interesting character. I think in one of the newer novels where they talk about like what sort of happened when the Empire took over, we find out that he joined the Empire and was basically like
He became a Moff.
it was a loyalty to the Chancellor sort of thing because because Palpatine is from Naboo, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
uh,
Panaka became a Moff in the Empire, and this is in the novel Leia, Princess of Alderaan, where Leia goes to Naboo at one point. She meets him, and then quickly after, there's an attack by Saw Gerrera's partisans where he gets killed. That's Panaka's fate.
damn,
Yeah,
Saw Gerrera gets around.
yeah.
Well,
He also appears in the other Padme centered novels, Queen's Gambit and that type of stuff. I haven't read them. I just know that he's in those. So if you want to see, if you want a bit more of Panaka, because he's definitely not enough in this movie, read those books.
this podcast is either really good or really bad for people with ADHD because we keep jumping from one thing to another and then trying to get back on course. But hey, that's essentially how if it's run by me, that's essentially how it's going to go because that's
Yes.
just how I roll. Anyway, so they rescue the Queen and her entourage from one battalion of battle droids, and then they head up to the hangar. We get that conversation with that droid of I'm taking them to Coruscant. That doesn't compute. You're under arrest. Swing. The
Goodbye.
droid gets all the droids get chopped in half. They escape on yet again one of the most beautiful ships in all of Star Wars.
Beautiful looking ship. All of the Naboo ships look awesome.
I can see why they wanted to bring it back for the Book of Boba Fett, so Din
Oh yeah,
Djarin could.
the N1 Starfighter, you mean?
Yes. The
Yeah.
his modified one with hyperspeed.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And on this Naboo fighter, we get introduced to one of the funniest characters in all of the movie, Rick Ollie. Ralph Brown is overacting this so much, and it's hilarious.
are we talking about the pilot who's like the power's back?
Shield generator's been hit. I love him. He's overacting so much, but like, power's back. That little droid did it. It's great.
I don't know if I can't remember if we mentioned this on camera, but we were talking about this behind the scenes of how like George Lucas was always focused on the technology and the world building, but not so much about the acting itself. So I'm going to assume that actor was like everything is so wooden in its delivery in certain instances that we kind of need to bring a little bit of life to it. So he kind of went the entire opposite direction of what George was going for.
In my opinion, there are three characters, well, actors in this movie who really overdo it, but it's hilarious. One is Boss Nass. I love him, like that kind of stuff. It's great. I love it.
I love that little the little gurgle with the drool flying everywhere. It's one of my favorite things. I used that in a video for my Spanish class once of like, this is how my day goes. And I'm like, I wake up and then it's Boss Nass's spit just flying everywhere. I'm like, this is what I do to wake myself up. It's just
fair enough. Yeah, but Boss Nass is one. Rick Ollie is one. The other one is the podracing announcer.
Oh, Greg Proops.
Sure.
I mean, the two-headed
Wait,
alien. You mean
is the did you mention the actor?
Greg Proops is the one who voices the basic speaking
Yeah.
half of that
Okay. There
alien.
you go.
Yeah. From whose line is it anyway? Um, but so they escape on this beautiful ship, which gets blasted. They have to fix the shield generator.
Insert
R2D2 is
R2.
on the ship. Yep. Small galaxy. R2D2 happens to be a royal droid of Naboo's royalty. I butchered the way I wanted to say that, but you get the idea. He's the only droid that survives because every single other droid gets blasted off the ship. He
Yep.
fixes the hyperdrive,
No, he
and
fixes the shield. The
well,
hyperdrive is still hit.
he fixes the shields, and he gets a warm reception. He's basically treated like a hero, and he gets a cleaning from the actual queen pretending to be a handmaiden, which is kind of funny. And that is when they make the decision to head on over to Tatooine, um, a very
It's controlled
well-known
by the
planet,
Huts.
a very well-known planet in Star Wars lore.
Yep.
And yeah, the reasoning is the Huts aren't looking for her. Basically, her fate would be the same if they landed on a Trade Federation controlled planet, except the Huts aren't
Except the
looking
Huts aren't
for her.
looking for her.
So they have the advantage there, uh,
Yeah.
in that they're not being sought out. So they head on down to Tatooine. They're looking for a power converter, I think. They're looking for parts to fix the hyperdrive, and they come
Just a
across.
new hyperdrive.
Yes. By the way, I want to mention that Captain Panaka and Padme come out, and Panaka's like, the Queen wants you to take her handmaiden with her. She's curious about the planet, which means Padme is curious about the planet,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she is the Queen. Uh,
Yeah, and this is the moment I get frustrated with some of the characters, because this is the moment where I'm like, you are taking a 14-year-old girl and Jar Jar with you, and those are the two that are supposed to, make sure that we can fix the ship, instead of take Panaka and Obi-Wan, two of the best, like, smartest characters out there who could probably do whatever they do way quicker, but they don't. No, we're gonna take these people with us.
well, here's the thing. I think Panaka is still trying to keep up the illusion that the Queen
No,
is
I'm
on the
I'm
ship.
aware of.
And why would you want to you can't have both Jedi leave the ship.
Yes, and that brings me to my next point. Qui-Gon should not have been a character in this movie. It should have been Obi-Wan by himself. He should have been a master already, and Qui-Gon never needed to exist, because I do think it creates a bit of an issue with the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, they keep mentioning how Obi-Wan was the one who trained Anakin. There was never any mention of Qui-Gon for some reason.
Because
Put him
Qui-Gon
in
never
here.
trained Anakin. Qui-Gon never trained Anakin.
No, no,
So
no.
that
I know about that. I'm talking more so about the fact that Obi-Wan says that he was trained by Yoda. Now I know in the next movie that they show that everyone is trained by Yoda. They never mention Qui-Gon in the original trilogy, and I still think that's a bit weird. And still, I just think that Obi-Wan should have been just one character. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan should have just been one character named Obi-Wan Kenobi. My opinion. I know not everyone will agree on that, but yeah, like if it had just been Obi-Wan, it would have been Obi-Wan goes to Tatooine. He probably would have taken Panaka with him. We probably wouldn't have Jar Jar in the first place, and it would have been a lot easier. But here we are. Sorry.
I'm gonna chalk this up to Yoda is alive in Episode 5. Qui-Gon is not, and just this, Obi-Wan has always bent the truth with Luke, so it's like
Yeah,
I'm
Obi-Wan
just
is
gonna
kind
give
of
you
a
the
dick like that.
I'm just gonna give you the shorthand version. Here's the master of the Jedi Temple who trained everybody, me included, in group classes when I was a youngling. he's alive. My actual master is not. So go to this guy. And it worked out for the best. We got to keep in mind that George Lucas, he forgot he created certain characters and hired actors to play hired different actors to play the same characters, and then was like, oh wait, these already exist. I'll just create new characters with these guys and make them related somehow to the other characters I created. See, Adin
Yeah,
Galia and Stas Ali.
yeah,
Those are
it's
my
a
two
weird one.
favorite those are my two favorite examples of George Lucas kind of forgetting his own canon at times.
Or
Uh,
Agen Kolar.
yes, yes. But anyway, so Qui-Gon, this handmaiden, I say with air quotes,
The Queen.
and Jar Jar are all exploring Tatooine. They're in I believe Mos Espa. I don't know if the
It's Mos
actual city
Espa,
they're
yeah.
in. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that counted as part of Mos Espa or if just the racetrack was held in Mos Espa. Uh, but anyway, so they're there. They're looking for a shop that can maybe give them the parts to their hyperdrive. Qui-Gon says, "Let's go to one of the smaller shops," and they meet Watto and young Anakin Skywalker, who I just want to point out that like Anakin still has a bit of a chip on his shoulder even at this young age. Like if you listen to him when he says, wouldn't have lasted so long anyway if I wasn't so good at building things. That is very much the arrogance that Anakin has. Now, granted,
Yeah,
he's still very innocent at this age. He still has a good
yeah.
heart. It hasn't been corrupted by missing family members, being away from family, being away from the people that he loves. So, because he still has that anchor to keep him at bay with his mom, he doesn't have all that anger in his heart yet.
Hmm.
He's just a happy-go-lucky kid with a bit of a chip on his shoulder because he can do things that other people can't. He can see things before they happen. He's able to
Yeah.
speak multiple languages, as we can tell. He speaks Huttese as well
Well,
as Basic.
that's the thing that he probably just learned on Tatooine. He's been there for quite a while, and he's been working for Watto, so makes sense. Um,
Yes,
I
but
just,
I'm
I just want to touch on the fact that I think Jake Lloyd did what any kid could have done with the character of Anakin, given the material. Because of course we know that George Lucas was definitely not very interested in giving him great direction. The writing also not great. Again, that goes back to my point. If it had just been Obi-Wan, he would have been the master. Anakin would have been his pupil, probably a little bit older than 9. I think Anakin was definitely too young in this movie. If you wanted to start that journey, like I get it, you wanted to really see the start of Anakin's journey, but it probably would have been a little bit of a better idea to age him up a little bit. But there's that. But I still do not blame Jake Lloyd for it, like so many other people have done, unfortunately.
I think him being as young as he is, but also as old as he is, works to the advantage of the story we're trying to tell, with the Jedi Council being so set in their ways that they're dooming themselves over the course of the next 3 movies and everything in
That's
between.
true. That is true. And of course, the movie is called The Phantom Menace. It's how Palpatine is behind it all and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you got a
Pup,
point.
puppet pulling the strings from the background.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get introduced to Anakin. He's flirting with Padme in a way.
Are you an angel?
I mean, here's the thing. That is definitely a pickup line, but he doesn't deliver it as such. And again, that's kind of
Because he's
going back to
9.
and also because of George Lucas and his focus on the advancement of technology in film,
Yeah.
and world building in this world he's created, as opposed to the actual people acting like people. But anyway, we see that relationship sort of forming. We see Jar Jar fucking around with one of those droids. What's the name of this particular type of droid? I forget.
Yeah, it's the pit droid.
The pit droids.
We
The
just
pit
know it
droid.
as a pit droid.
I laugh really hard now when I see that pit droid kick Jar Jar in the kneecap while he's
Yeah.
basically choking the droid. It's really
Hey,
funny. um, Meanwhile, outside we have Watto and Qui-Gon trying to negotiate, and
how is need to pay for this? I have 20,000 Republic Terrors. I don't Republic credits. I can't use Republic credits. I need something more real. It, credits will do fine. No, they won't. Credits will do fine. No, they won't. What do you think? You're some kind of Jedi waving a hand around like that? I'm a Toydarian, you know. Anyway, sorry.
credits do not work on me. Only money. That's where some of the Jewish stereotypes kind of get thrown into the discussion about Watto.
And
Whether
I
or not you
don't
want to believe
care.
them, whether or not you want to buy into them is entirely up to you. I just know that like we see examples of other Toydarians, including the actual king of Toydaria at some
Yeah,
point in future Star Wars content, and we
very
know that
soon actually.
he's not really obsessed with money, so this is basically a Watto thing. Maybe we can chalk it up to Dave Filoni being like, yeah, let's tweak the way we portray this species a little bit. And you know what? That gives Watto some more layers as an individual character of just like he is obsessed with money. He is a gambling addict. He
Does make me wonder how the hell did a Toydarian find himself to be a junk trader on Tatooine?
Choices, man. This is Star
Yeah,
Wars.
right.
Choices are the biggest driving force of literally everything going on in this universe, besides God itself. Like, that's essentially what is driving the majority of storytelling happening in this universe is
Star
God
Wars doesn't
and
doesn't have a god
the Force is God. The Force
in
is
a se-
God in a
in a
sense.
sense. It's their religion,
But basically, the Force, the universe itself is a character that is, and everyone else is making choices based around what is happening as a
yeah,
result of the universe. And the fact that Watto is here means that like either things did not play out the way he wanted them to, or things have played out exactly the way that he wanted them to. Maybe he
either
wanted to end
or.
up here. Uh,
Yeah,
but either way,
possible.
he's here and he has all the cards in his hand right now. And so he's like, you're not getting what you want. You need the money. Republic credits won't cut it. So get the
Yeah,
fuck out of my store. And then Qui-Gon's like, we're getting the fuck out of your store.
yeah.
And that's when we run into Sebulba.
Oh yeah,
Um,
the dog,
because Jar Jar couldn't help but eat an alien turkey leg of some kind off of a string.
which
And
cost seven whoopee whoopee for some reason.
yes, 7 whoopee whoopee, which
That's
is a
the
lot
thing.
of whoopee whoopee in my
By the way,
opinion.
this goes back to rule number 6. Some of this stuff is absolutely ridiculous. A currency is called whoopee whoopee. The F, the serious F.
Again, George Lucas loved to have fun with this stuff too.
Yeah,
Um,
a little too much.
and hey, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, they've been very capable of keeping up that humorous spirit that George Lucas
True.
left behind. But anyway, so Jar Jar is like whoopee whoopee. The turkey leg or whatever that thing was goes flying into Sebulba's soup. He's pissed. Grabs Jar Jar by the throat with his foot because he's
Yeah,
walking on his hands with his feet extended outward.
yeah,
And then Anakin is like they get into a trash talking contest in Huttese.
yeah,
And talking about the next time they're gonna race, which kind of reminds me of like various sports movies where it's like, I'll see you at the big game, I'll see you at the
yeah,
big
yeah,
dance, I'll see
yeah,
you at the karate competition, I'll see you at the skateboarding competition, I'll see you at the surfboard competition. Like they're acting tough against each other, but they're acting tough about this thing that they're really good at, or fighting
yeah.
is not really the key thing. Uh, which is a nice little throwback to just every movie ever made in the 80s that wasn't Star Wars related. Anyway, this is essentially where Anakin sort of becomes part of the group.
Yep.
Um, because he starts following them along. We get the Anakin gives Qui-Gon something. He lifts up his robe. That's
Sees
when
the
Annie's
lightsaber.
he sees the lightsaber. Oh, my bones are aching. Storms are coming in, and you better get going. That cute little old lady giving Anakin the "you better get home now" line because she can sense a storm coming in her bones. And Anakin is like, your ship is too far away. You'll get hit in
Come
the
with me.
sandstorm. They're very dangerous, which is kind of obvious, but he
Yeah.
felt the need to say it anyway. Um, Again, so I'm having fun with with some of these lines, just because it's like they're saying the obvious parts out loud, and it's kind of humorous with the delivery here and there. Anyway, so Anakin takes them home. He's like, "Mom, look, these are my friends. I literally just made 10 minutes ago, but I'm inviting them over for dinner. Come see my droid girl I like." And C-3PO's naked. There's a lot of lacrosse equipment in Anakin's room, which I think
Yeah.
is really,
Repaints it.
which
It's funny.
I love it because, like, remind me, isn't there something in The Empire Strikes Back that's basically a women's shaver that they used
Oh,
from one of the droids?
I don't know that, to be honest.
I I think they used like a microphone for one of the droid heads, and they used a woman's shaver for like some other device in the original trilogy.
Gotta
I
be
know they
creative
used
with painting.
I I know. So like the fact that they're using lacrosse equipment in
Yeah.
Anakin's room, it's just kind of fun. It's really funny, but also like a clever way to just be like, we're trying to make this look as unique as possible. Um, anyway, Anakin's showing off C-3PO in all of his nude form, wires exposed and everything.
Yeah, Anakin is showing off C-3PO, and C-3PO is showing off himself.
And Anakin's like, later I'll show you my racer. I'm building a pod racer. And the way he says it is like he's
It's
so
like,
proud
what?
of himself.
Yeah, like, this is my droid. Later, I'll show you my racer. Want to see my dick? Oh, wait, a little bit too young. Oops.
It reminds me of. So, did you ever watch That's So Raven?
No, did not.
Okay, so there's this character named Stanley on that show. He was kind of a later addition in the seasons, and he's this little kid who had a giant crush on Raven Simone, and she's like 10 years his elder, but it's like he kept hitting on her, and he actually had game, like he was actually pretty smooth, whereas Anakin is just not. He doesn't have as much game.
Like,
Uh,
Anakin
it,
is cute, but he's 9, and Padme's 14. So it's
it's
what it
it's
is,
like
you know.
it's like a young kid hitting on his babysitter in a sense.
Or in a sense, like, I kind of felt always like when I was watching this movie, particularly, I felt more like she was essentially just his older sister, and he's like, "Oh, come, older sister, I got so many cool things to show you," and the older sister's like, "That's nice, little brother." Like, pat on the head.
I mean, we gotta also keep in mind that, like, because she says it herself, this is a very new experience for her, not being on
Yeah,
Naboo.
yeah,
Like both of them have kind of been trapped on their planets for the longest time. Her with being a queen slash handmaiden in disguise, and
yeah.
him being a literal slave, uh, who can't go anywhere. So they've kind of just been trapped in their own environments, and they're both getting a culture shock in their own way to each other's worlds, and it's unique to them. Anyway, moving on. Darth Maul has sort of entered the picture a little bit. He's not on the
Uh,
planet yet, but he has been introduced in holographic form, and that is or hologram form, and that is
yeah.
when we sort of get the Lando Calrissian, this deal is getting worse all the time comparisons, where he's like, where Newt Gunray is like, now there are two of them, and his
It's getting
assistant
out of
is like,
hand.
we should not have made this bargain. Um,
Well, but you
and
made it anyway, so here you are.
like the Sith are, the Phantom Menace itself is coming to light. The Sith are returning to the spotlight
Yep.
in that sense. Meanwhile, we flash back to the dining room table that they're having dinner and they're having conversations of like, "Are you a Jedi? Do you know about pod racing? I'm the only human who can do it. I'm showing off again. Um, uh, I saw your laser sword. Are you a Jedi? Are you here to free us? No, I'm not here to free you. We're trying to get fuel for our ship. Um, but we don't have the parts we need and we don't have the money to pay for it. Um, uh, Mom, can I race to help these guys get the money they need? No. Okay, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, Mom, I want to help them. I'm going to race and they can bet on me. It's like, no, it's awful. I die every time you do it. But, Mom, no one in this galaxy helps each other. Well, he's got a point. Okay, he can help you. Sure.
Which, now that I think about it, it's a callback to last week's discussion with Tales of the Jedi Episode 3, where we have the senator who's like pretending to be all broken up about
Oh, yeah.
Master Catri's death, and then he's like, to go back would be devastating. 5 seconds later, let's go.
Yeah.
Where like some other character says something and then he like changes his mind immediately. The same thing happened with Shmi here, but it was for good reason because Anakin did bring up a point of you always talk about how no one in the galaxy helps each other. So again, we're seeing Anakin having a good heart, and we actually get an example of something disproving what he just said. Because if you remember from Tales of the Jedi Episode 1 with Ahsoka and that entire village,
Yeah.
I mean, the moment Pavti was getting beaten up by that tiger, the entire fucking village came to her rescue. And when poor Ahsoka got taken away, the entire village was ready to go ape shit with guns ablazing to find that tiger and bring her home.
Yeah.
So it's like people do help each other in the galaxy. It's just not happening a lot on Tatooine. And
Well,
Anakin
that's the
wants to
thing.
be.
They've only really known Tatooine, and Shmi has experienced a lot in her life, where like she experienced the fact that she was wagered and then just moved from owner to owner, and no one seems to ever really help her, and it's all them just out for money.
Yeah, but one thing I've heard people say, specifically one of my old teachers from my old professors from college, he said, "Be the change you want to see in this world." And lo and behold, that professor actually ran for office at one point. He didn't
Sure.
win his election, but he did try to be the change he wanted to see in the world. And
That's
that is
cool.
Anakin in this moment. He's like, I want to see change. I want to see, I want to see more people helping more people. And I want to be that person who helps these guys get what they need. And so good on Annie for that. We hear Shmi say he gives without any thought of reward
Yeah.
when she's talking to Qui-Gon, and
Yeah.
that's when we find out he's Jesus. He's the baby
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
He's a virgin birth.
Yeah. I'm just not gonna say anything about that.
I mean, here's the thing: Star Wars parallels from a lot of real life stuff and a lot of myth / legend / folklore stuff as well. So it's like the story of how Jesus Christ himself came to be is a very interesting one, and that's essentially the story they adopted for Anakin in this moment.
Yeah.
Like his midichlorian count of over 20,000, which kind of now that I'm watching Dragon Ball Z Bridge with my sister, I'm thinking power levels of like over 9,000. When
Yeah.
I hear that line of like
Yeah.
over
True.
20,000 over 20,000 midichlorians brought him to life, without the aid of a father. And she carried him. She birthed him. She raised him, and now he's building a pod racer, screaming, "It's working! It's working!" While Jar Jar's tongue has been electrified to complete numbness.
Yeah,
I
it's
love.
also like Anakin literally warns him, "Don't get your body parts in that thing. It's gonna get numb for hours." And instantly after, he gets the tongue stuck in it.
Well,
Like, dude,
In fairness to Jar Jar, he says, "Don't stick your hand in it," which he didn't. But he pulled a
no,
Tim the
another body
he
part.
he pulled a Tim the Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement, where it's like Tim Allen, when he was playing that character in Home Improvement, would always bump his head on literally everything. And essentially, that's Jar Jar in this moment. He's trying to pick up a tool, trying to be safe about it. He kept his hand out of the beam and then bumps his head / runs his mouth right into the beam. And he's kind of seeing stars for a second. He's probably smelling colors for a little bit, and then it's like, my tongue is numb. I can't talk. I've just been to the dentist, and they filled me with tons of Novocaine. And then his hand gets stuck in the propeller, and Padme has to like help him out. Kitster is giving us the slang of Tatooine children with the term wizard.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
which,
this is so Wizard Annie.
by the way,
Actually, that's later in the hangar, just before the pod race.
Yeah, I think there's a comic that came out recently that kind of gives the backstory of what happened to Kitster when the Empire took over. So it's like, I think he even has an interaction with Darth Vader in that comic. So
Interesting.
yeah, he has no idea
his
it's
old
Annie.
friend. His old
Yeah.
friend.
My, how the tables have turned there. But anyway, so the pod racer works. Anakin's getting his blood checked for infections. I want to make a drug.
At the same time.
I want to make a drug testing joke for sports, but I don't think I could make it. I don't think I could land it effectively.
Probably not.
Anyway, Darth Maul arrives on Tatooine, sends a probe droid to investigate, to try and find his targets. And then we get to the actual arena for the pod race. And before we get to like the official deal of like, this is so wizardy, and Qui-Gon and Watto making the deal for
Which
like,
is not understandable whatsoever.
I mean, I kind of get it. Why would you want like Watto? As far as we know, he doesn't have any other slaves. Why would he want to put both of his slaves on the line in a race?
He doesn't. He puts only Annie on the line.
Exactly, but that was the original bet that Qui-Gon was trying to make. So he hedged his bet and was like, "You get one of my slaves if you win, and we're gonna let fate decide which slave you get." And Qui-Gon was just like,
okay,
his hand again.
I have a question. I have a question for you. Do you know what who they bet on in that bet?
Well, I know Watto bet on Sebulba.
Yeah, and Qui-Gon takes that bet. So the thing is, if Sebulba doesn't win the race, that specific bet goes. Besides the other bets that they have going.
Okay, fair.
The betting makes no sense in this entire thing because it's very difficult to follow.
In fairness, when you're a gambling addict, you kind of lose all perspective, and you're just like, I can win. You don't really, you kind of forget what's at stake because you're just so focused on getting the win. And, Qui-Gon is still kind of stroking Watto's ego here and there by taking all these bets. He's using gambling to his advantage, even if some of the bets are kind of adding up in the way that maybe doesn't make sense. But the bet they make is, if Anakin wins, Anakin's freedom is
actually, if Anakin wins, they get the hyperdrive parts. If Sebulba doesn't win, Qui-Gon wins Anakin's freedom. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, when you phrase it like that, the bets actually do kind of make sense to me. Basically, in order for both things to happen, Sebulba has to lose. I mean, in order for both things to happen, Anakin has to win.
Anakin has to win the race,
yeah. In order for at least one thing to happen, Sebulba has to lose. So that makes perfect sense to me. Anyway, I want to get to one of my favorite parts of the movie, which I have never really appreciated until now. For some reason, this watching of this movie that I had last night just made this scene so cool to me and so hilarious. The look on Padme's face when Anakin and Kitster say that Anakin has never finished a race.
Oh
She's like, you've never won a race, never even finished, and she's just dumbfounded, and
yeah.
she's looking at Qui-Gon of like, dude, what the fuck, man?
What the
Our
fuck have you
ship,
been missing?
our ability to leave this planet is on the line. My fucking ship, which you think belongs to someone else, but it's my fucking ship, is on the line here. And if this little boy who we just met doesn't win this race, we're stranded here. We're broke. And like, what the
Yeah.
fuck, dude? And Anakin's just like, Kitster's right, I'll win this time, and they just walk off innocently, as if
Yeah.
nothing wrong has been said in that moment. And I'm just like, that face Padme made will be ingrained in my brain forever. Of just like, it's so funny to me. It's so funny to me. But anyway, we get to the actual race. Um, we
By the
get
way,
the
in all fairness, some of the greatest Formula One drivers did not finish their first race either. Like Michael Schumacher did not finish his first race. He got there eventually, you know.
But anyway, as all these racers are lining up towards the starting line, we're getting the introductions of all the different racers, all these different misfits slash celebrities in Tatooine and in the racing circuit as a whole. And we get a conversation with Qui-Gon and Padme of like, Qui-Gon is making assumptions as to what the Queen would approve of, and then Padme is like, she
Well,
would
I
not
don't
approve.
approve. Mm.
Yeah, I don't approve. I'm the actual queen, and as soon as I make that reveal in the next hour of this movie, you're gonna feel really fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, I'm gonna fast forward through the race. Basically, like like Anakin stalls
No, no,
at the
no, no, no,
starting
no,
line.
no. Okay, okay. You're skipping a very important part. The moment that they start their engines. This is probably my favorite part of the entire movie because the sound design is an eargasm. It is so goddamn perfect. The way that Ben Burtt, because first of all, the sound design throughout this entire movie has been awesome, has been absolute perfection, really. The way that Ben Burtt was able to do the sound design for all of these movies is absolutely perfect, and there's a reason he's multiple Oscar winner in terms of sound. But the moment that the pod engines go on and you have all the different sounds and like the way the camera pans all over them and you hear the different kind of engines is like, oh, it's so good. And well, of course, the pod race after is also really fucking good. Mostly with that sound design, but I cannot get over the fact that the sound design is so goddamn awesome in this movie.
The pod racers are very pleasing to the ears. I will give you that.
Yeah.
Not just that, but the pit crews, the pit droids as well. The sound one of them makes when they get stuck, when they get sucked through.
Yeah, they blow up one of the engines. Yeah.
Yeah.
But by the way, the funny thing is that some people might think that everything that happens in this race is very unrealistic, and I'm just here to tell you it's not. I've seen everything in this race happen in real life in actual races. I've seen people stall on the grid and win the race. I've seen people get fucked over in a pit stop the way that what's his name, Odie Mandrell did. I've seen whatever. What else? I have like notes on this one. Oh yeah, I've seen people take damage throughout a race, make a pit stop, and still win the race. I've seen people make their way from last to first throughout a race. All of this can happen. So everything that happens in this race is actually very realistic. It can actually happen. Now, sure, it is a bit of a crazy race, but it is also due to the fact that Anakin wasn't lying. His pod is insanely fast, like so much faster than everyone else's, and that's the reason why he's able to catch up every time. I've seen that happen in real life racing, so it's actually a pretty good depiction of what happens in real life as well.
the two things we can probably say haven't happened in a real race, but have probably happened in Mario Kart several times
Yeah,
is for one, the jumping up the ramp and thrusting your way in the first place.
yeah.
If
Well,
Dale
to be
Earnhardt,
to be
go
fair,
ahead.
like in Formula One races, people sometimes do get pushed off the track and then need to find their way onto the track. Sometimes going through grass or gravel, but they still make their way onto the track. It's possible.
But that's not what this is. This is an evil Knievel ramp. And if
Yeah,
and if
yeah,
and if Dale Earnhardt Jr. or Mario Andretti tried to like run up this ramp and then somehow thrust their car's way into first place, they would explode on impact. So that obviously can't happen.
no,
Um, the other thing that wouldn't happen in a real race. I mean, it could, but it would be a lot more tragic than the way it was treated here. Tuscan Raiders
yeah, the Tuscans, yeah,
shooting at the racers in the middle of a race. Now, because of the Book of Boba Fett, my perspective on this has changed a little bit because we now understand that Tuscan Raiders are essentially the like Tatooine is their ancestral home, and they sort of own the rights to the waters that are no longer there on that planet. In a
yeah,
sense, like it is their birthright to have the to run the dune seas and whatnot of Tatooine. So, as far as I'm concerned, what was once thought of just a bunch of locals shooting up a sporting event because they could, I now see it as they are sort of defending their home from being besmirched by this race in a way.
yeah, true.
Again, culture. Every species has their own culture. And granted, Tuscan Raiders, like as far as we know, they're humans who just speak in a different tongue and wrap their faces in bandages and whatnot. But this is another. The Tuscans have their own culture. They and we have to take that into consideration now whenever we think about them and the things they've done in past movies and past mediums. And in this case, I feel like they're just protecting their ancestral home from being besmirched by this race that's happening on the soil that they could consider their birthright to own. So think think about that however you want. You can think of them as savages, or you can think of them as being territorial and like protecting what they think is theirs, which we now understand through other Star Wars content that they have a claim to. But anyway,
Yeah,
Anakin wins the race. It was a nail biter. Some people died. Sebulba has a bunch of egg on his face. Anakin won his freedom. Uh, Watto's pissed.
yep,
He knows something is afoot, but he can't put his hand on what is afoot. He basically knew Qui-Gon knew what was going to happen
yeah,
through his Jedi instincts, but he doesn't know the Jedi context to make the whole claim. But anyway, he gets the parts. He gets the boy. Um, Anakin is going to be a Jedi. But
Also,
he's
one thing that happens during the race, Arsing cameo. First time we see
oh yes,
Arsing.
Aura Singh, yes, the famed bounty hunter who has some fun interactions in the Clone Wars with various characters we like and or dislike, and who we find out was apparently killed by Woody Harrelson.
Uh,
No,
yeah, and
I like that.
in a line of dialogue in Solo, that's so lame.
I honestly like it because it just gives a little bit more credence to Tobias. Um, what's his
It was a
last name?
stupid character. Oh, I don't like his character. Tobias Beckett, you mean?
Yes, Tobias Beckett. Thank you. I was thinking of Tobias Whale from Black Lightning on the CW. Um,
Sure.
that's essentially where my brain goes now whenever I hear the name Tobias. Um, so Anakin wins his freedom. He's happy that he's gotten his freedom, but he's sad that he has to leave his mom, and he doesn't
No,
want to
no,
leave his
man.
mom. And this is where Anakin Anakin's journey truly begins towards the dark side, because the moment he leaves his mom is when is when he struggles to let go of his emotions. Like, that's where the attachment sets in, the unhealthy attachment that the Jedi Council is constantly warning about. Now, this is something they could be considered right about here, because Anakin is a very attaching person, as we'll see many examples of in the future.
Yep.
He struggles to let go in a way that others don't, because of the fact that, well, this is kind of why the Jedi at this stage of time would only take babies and toddlers. Like, they wouldn't take anyone past a certain age, because those children hadn't developed enough conscience to develop attachments.
Yep.
Meanwhile, Anakin's a 9-year-old boy. He's like the only thing he's known consistently is his mother, and this home of Tatooine, these warm sands of the desert, and his pod. Um, so now that he's being taken away from that, he's struggling to let go. And we see it and hear it when Shmi says, "Don't look back. Don't look
Yeah.
back." And what does he do? He looks fucking back, which is symbolism of the fact that he's always going to struggle with this journey for the next 20 plus years of
Yeah.
his life, as he slowly turns into Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
struggling to let
I I
go.
think I think this is probably one of the strongest moments in the movie, like very emotional beat. Especially if you realize the very next time that he sees his mother is in a Tuscan Raider hut in the next movie, and she is dying in his arms. Like, that's just heartbreaking, and also makes you understand why Anakin eventually turns to the dark side. You know.
I mean, homesickness and PTSD are not a strong combination.
No, no, they are not.
But anyway, they're boarding the ship, and then Darth Maul comes in on a speeder bike. He only shows one blade off, and he never takes off his hood. But he shows that, like, hey, I got a laser sword too, bitch. What's up? And
It's
gives
red.
Qui Gon a bit of a fight, and excuse me. And so Qui Gon makes a quick exit. And it is at that moment that they realize, we have some shit we need to tell the Jedi Council when we get back home to Coruscant. And Anakin is um, introducing himself to Obi-Wan Kenobi, making himself at home, and he's like, "Oh, space is cold. Space is fucking
Mm,
cold, man." Uh, um, and so now he's getting a taste of what Padme was getting when she was on Tatooine, a sense of the unfamiliar,
yep.
experiencing something new to him, and he doesn't know how to take it. Um, but anyway, we arrive at Coruscant, and that's where we are introduced to Sheev Palpatine in normal form, in the form that he presents himself to people, as opposed to the ugly witch that he actually is. It's kind of like in, I guess you could make a comparison to Sleeping Beauty with, I want to say Maleficent, where she, or is
Yeah.
this Red Riding Hood? Either way, the beautiful wicked queen who, in order to lure people into a false sense of security, also has this hooded, ugly figure with dark magic that he occasionally shows off as well when no one is looking.
I think you might be
S-
thinking of Snow White.
I might be mixing both of them up at the same time,
Doesn't
but
matter.
either way, you get the analogy of this is the Dr. Jekyll to the Mr. Hyde for Sheev Palpatine.
Mm,
This is the version he shows off to people proudly, and um, we get introduced to Terrence Stamp, Chancellor Valorum.
yeah.
Um, we Anakin and Jar Jar are sent off with Padme and who we think is actually Queen Amidala at this moment to discuss matters with the Senate. Meanwhile, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, they go to the Jedi Council. They're like, we have encountered what we think to be a Sith Lord. The Sith have been extinct for millennia. You're wrong, Ki-Adi-Mundi.
Shut up, Ki-Adi-Mundi. You're an idiot.
Yes, you are. We also, but Mace Windu and Yoda are like, we should at least give this some thought. And then they're like, see you guys later. Qui-Gon stays is like, one more other thing. I think I found the chosen one. And they're like, really? Bring him to us. Let's give him a test that even if he does pass, we're still not going to let him train. So some things happen. We get a call from I can't tell if this is Sabe as Queen Amidala or if this is actually Padme in this moment in the Senate floor, because it's like the way that getting Keira Knightley was a great choice because they look so much alike and it's incredibly hard to tell the difference between the two. So it's like this is a moment where it would make sense for Padme to be wearing the makeup and the outfits, but you still never know if it's truly her because of the fact that they put on that accent, and which gives more credence to my point of like, I think they all do that accent when they're playing the Queen just to throw people off. And it worked here because I have no idea which one of these two is actually acting as the Queen in this moment. But either way, the way Palpatine is whispering into her ear of like, look at these chuckleheads who have no idea what the fuck they're doing except just doing a whole bunch of corruption. Like they're just biding their time, trying to make do for their corporate donors, not giving a shit about what happens to our people. Do something. Do it. Do it. He doesn't actually say that, but that's essentially what's going on. Is like, what is the name of that wicked wizard that controls the king in the second Lord of the Rings movie, The Two Towers?
Oh, Saruman.
No, not him. Not him.
Yeah, Saruman controls King Theoden in Two Towers.
I mean the advisor.
Oh, Grima Wormtongue.
Yes, him. That's essentially what I feel like. That's essentially what I feel like Palpatine is acting as in this moment. He is Wormtongue, and he is I don't want to say manipulating, but he is putting thoughts into Queen Amidala's head. Of like, Chancellor Valorum is useless. Tell him to go fuck himself and call for a vote of no confidence in his leadership. And everyone is taken aghast by this. Now, apparently in the DVD version, everyone is chanting vote now, vote now, vote now. But in the Disney Plus version, they're all just going like, they're all just mumbling. And it's like, oh my God, this is happening. Like it's shocked mumbling happening throughout the room. So they don't know what to do with this. But this is where Palpatine is basically like the Bill Belichick of this. Like he is the playmaker who is making all the calls, and they're all working out in his favor right now. So he's getting what he wants. He finds out he's been nominated, and we'll cut back to the Jedi Temple here because, like I said before, Anakin passes the test, but they don't let him train. They're just like, you're too old. We're too set in our ways. We don't want to train you because why should we? And Qui-Gon is like adamant. I will train the boy. My other apprentice is ready to become a knight. Give us what we want. And then Yoda's like, we'll talk about this another time.
By the way, speaking of Yoda, in the new version, CGI Yoda looks so much better than the puppet. Like
Yeah,
it's not even close. Because
I don't know what happened with the puppet in between the filming of the original trilogy and episode and in the Phantom Menace, but for some reason, the eyes, specifically the eyes and the hair, just look so off
yeah, it looks
with
very
this
awkward.
particular puppet.
And
But I
I
see it as a, if I may, I see this
yeah.
as a laughably bad thing. Again, we're trying to be a
Mm,
positive podcast here, and so,
no,
so
you
I'm going
can
to
see
treat
it as
this as
that.
I'm going to treat this as a laughably bad sort of thing.
Thing is that
But
nowadays you can just watch the CGI version, which is, as I said, like a lot better because not only is it just better, does it just look better than the puppet because. And I still don't really get why the puppet was so awkward because, yeah, like in the original trilogy, in Empire and Jedi, they were able to pull off the puppet perfectly and made me truly believe that that wasn't a live creature. And for some reason, in the Phantom Menace, it's not very convincing. It doesn't look that good. But yeah, you can just see the CGI version now if you just watch the movie on Disney Plus. But it also makes more sense in in terms of continuity with the rest of the prequels because the rest of the prequels already had a CGI Yoda in there in the original version already. So that's something that yeah, it just makes sure that it's a bit more. It has more continuity and it looks better.
I agree with these statements. Getting back to the ongoings of Palpatine and the Queen Amidala, so she's staring out the window, wondering what the fuck's gonna happen to my people.
Yeah, but this is also extremely frustrating because at the very beginning of the movie, the reason that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are going to Naboo is because the Republic has caught wind of the fact that the Trade Federation is blocking Naboo. So they wanted to investigate what happened. The investigation by the Jedi is as such. They went there, they were attacked, they saw the invasion of Naboo, communication is completely blocked off, the Trade Federation has blocked the planet, all the allegations that they were thinking is true, they have word from the Jedi, and that was the entire reason that they were sent there, simply because some idiot Trade Federation guy is like, there is no proof. He's shouting that in the chambers, then makes Valorum say, well, maybe we should investigate. Maybe we should send people. That's what you did at the beginning of the movie.
I hadn't thought of that, and you know
It's
what?
so
That
weird.
now that you bring it up, it is a little maddening. It is a little
Yeah.
weird, but I these. I mean, like we said at the beginning when we went over the rules, this stuff isn't perfect. We love it anyway.
No. Yes.
Uh,
Because I still like watching this movie. I don't have much of an issue, but it's like the moment you think about it, like, wait a moment.
here's what I need to touch on though. Why does the fucking Trade Federation, which is not a planet as far as we know, it's just it's literally the
Well,
embodiment of corp. It's
to be fair, the Trade Federation is made from a certain species called Nemoidians, which reside on Cato Nemoidia. So, yes, it is a planet. Cato Nemoidia is the home of the Trade Federation. So it is a planet. They just have like a faction that they created, you know.
then just say the delegate from Cato Nemoida. Like,
Yeah.
and you know what? I can kind of see what George is going for here because subtlety was never his specialty.
No.
But it's like the delegates from the Trade Federation. I'm like and this is something I hadn't thought of until now in my adult years. But it's like the Trade Federation, the literal embodiment of corporation, has a Senate seat, which is kind of wild when you think about it. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not wrong in its comparisons to real life because guess what? Like he just skipped the whole part about lobbyists existing and went straight to like, let's give the corporations their own Senate seat, where they can just like mess everything up for the benefit of themselves. So it's like it's not subtle, but it works for the themes of like you give corporations too much power and they will use it to step on the people. George Lucas was a child of the hippie era, like he was a crystal child. Like, he was all about putting the power to the people and sticking it to the man. That and that is very much in line with this. But anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, which was the Senate hearing had just concluded. We've got we're kind of getting word that Palpatine has been nominated for this election for Supreme Chancellor, and before he walks in the door, she's staring out the window trying to figure out what's going to happen to her people and her planet. And it's at this point that Jar Jar does something right. He mentions
Yes.
he talks about his culture. He talks about how Gungans are proud people, proud warriors. They are
Yep.
fighters. And he comes from that culture. And it's at that moment that the queen, whether it be Padme or Sabe underneath that makeup, is inspired to go back home and develop relations with the Gungan people, to form an alliance, to form an army, to combine their forces with their grand army
Yep.
of the Gungan species and take back their home. And I love it. I love this plan. She is so confident in it, and nothing she says to Qui-Gon can stop her in that moment. I'm kind of jumping ahead to when they're on the ship flying home, which, by the way, the Trade Federation blockade lets them go right through. Lets them go right
Yeah.
through, which
Yeah.
I get, which I honestly get. I get because it's like the whole time they've been trying to keep her on the planet, trying to get her to sign the treaty, just letting her pass on by through and land on the planet. They're essentially like letting her just walk right into her own cage, or so they think. Or so they
Well,
think.
but what doesn't make sense is like apparently the Trade Federation has all kinds of ships all around the planet, and instead of just like putting out a tractor beam or shooting at the ship to just disable the ship, they're just like, no, you can land on the planet, you can concoct your entire plan, and then we're gonna come after you. Yeah, that makes sense.
No one said the Trade Federation was perfect. Again, as we established earlier, they are like the Trade Federation is full of desperate people making desperate choices. Like
Yeah.
they're trying to just keep their trade routes intact. They're trying to keep their taxes and whatnot. Like they're trying to keep their money. They're trying to keep what power they have. And I should also mention when the Queen mentions she's going back home, it's one of the few times that Palpatine is like caught off guard throughout his entirety as a character. There are very
Well,
few times.
okay, but there's this little he's like, wait, but you should stay here and all that kind of stuff. But then she walks out, and we see Palpatine looking, and then as the wipe cut starts, there's a little smile, very
You
little
know,
smile at the very last
you know
moment.
what? You know why that is in my mind. It's because he had a plan. She was going against that plan, and then he realized I can make this work still.
Yes.
Because that's just it. Palpatine has always been good at adapting
Yeah, because
to.
also when he's talking to Gunray a little later, and Gunray is explaining like they landed the ship over there, and this is what's happening. He's like, this could work in our advantage. Like he already thought of that. Like, okay, this could work in our advantage. We're okay, actually.
He doesn't like when his plans are changed, but he's really good at working on the fly.
Yeah,
And that's what makes him such an effective villain, that he was able to be in hiding for God knows how many decades, just biding his time, waiting to unleash his foolproof plan, and then die, and then wait another 30 years to unleash another foolproof plan. Well, maybe
and
not
die
foolproof,
again.
Yeah, and die again. But basically, it takes it like he's not thrown off very easily, and he's still shown himself to be very adaptable whenever in the few times that he has been thrown off. Um, before before the Queen gets back on the ship to go home, we get that conversation with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan of like, you're a much wiser man than I am, only because of your teachings, Master. You'll make a fine Jedi Knight, that sort of thing. Again, that's a parallel to what that was the official thing released first that set up the dialogue we got from last week with Dooku and Qui-Gon in
Dooku
Tales of the
saying
Jedi
that,
episode 2.
and later, Obi-Wan says it to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith.
Generations.
And what I like is how Yoda essentially summarizes that in The Last Jedi, where he's like, "That's what teaching is. We are what they are. What no, we are what they grow beyond. Yeah, they grow beyond what you are as a teacher. So there's only so much you can teach them, and at that point, they will become their own person based on your teachings, and that is a part where you can't reach yet, and that's every time that a teacher sees in in the student that the student has surpassed that point.
Exactly. So it's just setting up Obi-Wan to be the next generation of the Jedi in a sense, and he'll carry on that stuff to Anakin and so on and so forth. I just thought it was worth bringing up again. So when when the Queen says, "Jar Jar Binks, Misa, Your Highness, I need your help," everyone is caught off guard in that moment. But this is where Jar Jar shines. This is where he
For a
shines
change.
because and this is kind of what sets up him to be Padme's advisor in the future movies when she becomes a senator, because it's like he plays peacemaker really well here. Like he brings these two people together. He brings his people of the Gungans and the surface dwellers of the Naboo together. And it's also at this point that we find out that Padme has been playing everyone this entire time. And she's like,
Yep.
"It was necessary for me to protect myself. This is my bodyguard who's just been pretending to be me." And
You think and use no better than the Gungans?
yes, yes, every single surface dweller kneels before Boss Nass, and he's very happy about this because it's like he now sees that his fears originally have not been realized, that
Yep.
nobody sees any that they're on equal footing. And that's when the symbiosis that Obi-Wan was talking about earlier, it comes into play here. Like they are now one people. They are one Naboo, and they are
Well,
establishing a plan.
they're coming together to fight a greater threat, an outside threat.
Exactly. They're doing exactly that. They're coming together as one, and so the plan is Gungans fight the droids on the battlefield. Um, Pilots will try to attack the droid control ship to knock out the shields. And they're going to, and meanwhile, everyone else, the important people of the group are going to, I'm saying
Break the
that to be
palace.
funny, but they are kind of the important people of the group. They're going to
Yeah.
raid the palace. And so, well, let's just cover all our bases here. The Gungans, they're showing that they are, in fact, very capable, very proud warriors. They are holding the line.
Decent.
They're like even Jar Jar, like he's still being clumsy, but he's failing upwards. Like when he gets the droid arm with the gun tangled up in his feet, he makes it
He
work to his
he uses
advantage.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, he uses it. Like when I think he dropped what either something crashed into the catapult or he dropped a mechanism that caused all the boulders to fall out
Well,
of their thing.
he like tries to climb onto one of the carts that is carrying all the boomas, and the thing is that he holds on to the mechanism that releases all of it. So because of the fact that he's too heavy, the mechanism opens, all the boomers roll out, but actually that takes out a couple of droids and tanks. So it actually worked to his advantage.
Again, failing upwards, stumbling into success. That is essentially what Jar Jar is doing here, and like that's his strength. Either that's his strength, or that's the Force just like cutting this poor guy a break. He's like, he has suffered enough. It is time for him to start doing some good. So let us, the Mystic Universe at B, give him some good luck here, even if it doesn't look like good luck. But anyway, while that's going on, the Jedi and the royalty section of Naboo are having success invading the Thean Palace. They make it to the hangar. Anakin hides in the cockpit, and Qui-Gon accurately says, Anakin, stay in that cockpit. You'll be safe there. And boy, was he right, because he felt right at home in that cockpit. Like he said, like
he even finds a child-sized helmet for himself.
Like it was the will of the Force for him to be in that cockpit, and somehow Qui-Gon knew, and he was just like, stay in that cockpit. It is destiny for you to be in there. So just stay in there, and things will work out. And they did
Work out
for him. And then we get the door opening with
dun,
Darth Maul,
dun.
and everyone looks at Darth Maul. The Jedi say, we'll handle this. And everyone's like, fuck this shit, I'm out. Fuck this shit, I'm out. They go the long way. And we get that beautiful scene of Darth Maul pulling his hood off, releasing the one blade, and then the other blade. Ooh, it's still cool
say,
every time it happens on screen.
It's a great reveal, very dramatic, and I'm just gonna say something, and I don't want you to interrupt me. I am one of the very few people in this world who doesn't love this fight, and I'm gonna say why. But you go on with what you wanted to say.
Well, anyway, we get the fight between these guys, and it's full of a lot of. So this is where we see the evolution from what George Lucas had in mind from the original trilogy of like more of a samurai style of fighting with two hands, a lot of swinging motions, a lot of angles here and there, to now more of a kung fu style sort of thing. A lot of it's a product of its times. Of we were getting a lot more fast-paced action martial arts movies around this time. And so the combat was modified a lot more to be more acrobatic, to be more flashy. And in headcanon's sakes, Case, I know you feel like some of the lightsaber fights are a little bit too choreographed. I feel like we can chalk it up to the Force being at play and like them being a sense the next move of what their opponents are going to do. And so they need to do those flippy motions here and there as like feints, the same way Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali would be like, they'd lean in forward, or they'd throw out a jab just to sort of like set something up for the actual attack that they're trying to land. They're throwing the jab out there, or at least faking it out there, so that they can throw the big right hand. And that's essentially what I'm thinking of in my head. Also, Darth Maul is just so full of ego, that he's showing off at every turn he gets, because he's like, look at me with my double-bladed lightsaber, and I'm doing all the flippy doos. Like I'm jumping higher than you. I'm kicking you. I'm using everything as a weapon because I'm just that full of ferocity. So, in my opinion, that's just his personality coming out into play on the battlefield there. And so he's gonna show off. He's gonna be that way. And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are just adapting. By the way, this is one like we see Obi-Wan using a very aggressive acrobatic style. Both he and Qui-Gon are using the Form 4 lightsaber combat style. And that's not something we'll see in the next movie, because I think it was something along the lines of Qui-Gon's death made Obi-Wan more of a pacifist, and so he switched to Form 3, which is more defensive.
Okay,
Um,
possible.
uh, at least that's what I've read. I don't know if that's still the canonical reason, but it was something that was mentioned a lot when the Legends books were still a thing. So it's like that. That's always the reason I've attributed it in my head is like as time went on, Obi-Wan became more reliant on his title of negotiator, him trying to be more passive, and so like he switched to Form 3. Um,
Right.
uh, but here we see him in all his youth being super aggressive,
Yeah.
using all the twirls, all the acrobatic motions, and it's working out for him in some instances and not so much in others. They get behind those laser walls. Qui-Gon is using his battle meditation, which is something he would be known for very much so. Obi-Wan not so much. Um,
Hmm.
just keeping his energies in check, and he's doing really well for himself. Obi-Wan wasn't fast enough to get past the rest of the walls, so Qui-Gon has to take the fight solo. He gets hit in the face with the hilt of Darth Maul's sword, and then he gets stabbed, and he collapses. And
And what I actually like is how they brought that back in Rebels. Actually, the last fight between Obi-Wan and Maul, because Maul attempts the same move. Like at one point, he also gets his lightsaber like this. He does that, but Obi-Wan sees through that and cuts through the lightsaber and also through Maul with that motion. It's interesting that
but
Mole tried the same thing with that one.
well, I think that's a sign that, and we're going to talk about this a lot as this podcast goes on in future weeks. With when we feature stuff involving Maul, he was just a character that never really evolved past a certain point because like he was so full of rage and so full of anger that he couldn't move past what he was
True.
when he got cut in half because that's essentially his fate. Like as soon as Qui-Gon is taken out of the battle, Obi-Wan has to like center himself. He's being very aggressive. He gets knocked off the ledge. His lightsaber is thrown down the chute, and then he has to calm himself down, call out to Qui-Gon's lightsaber, and then
Yeah.
use it to basically bisect Darth Maul. And we think, at least in that period of time, that that's the end of Darth Maul forever.
Yeah,
Lo and
and
behold, he ended up living for several more decades, entirely fueled by his rage for Obi-Wan Kenobi and his desire to just be successful in some way, shape, or form.
I still love the story that went on behind the scenes with all of this because pretty much like whenever anyone was asked like what do you like about the Phantom Menace, a lot of people said Darth Maul. Why do you like Darth Maul? Was an interesting question because Darth Maul doesn't really have any lines. He doesn't do all that much. He just
Same
looks
with Boba
cool.
Fett. Same with
Yeah,
Boba Fett.
yeah, and that's the thing. I really don't get all the hype for Boba Fett, honestly. But the thing with Maul is like he just looked cool and he had a cool lightsaber. So the entire thing was like, okay, so it's just cool, but there's not much to his character. No, that's true. He's very underused in this movie. He doesn't get much to do. He doesn't get much lines, and I feel that's why they were like, well, we need to bring him back. And I will always remember the interview that Dave Filoni gave when he was asked about this, because George Lucas went up to Dave Filoni one day, said that, hey, Dave, I want to bring back Darth Maul, but George, he's dead. Yes, but I want to bring him back. Figure it out. And Filoni was just like, how the fuck am I going to bring this character back? So Filoni needed to think about that for quite a while, but eventually he managed to find a way to bring him back. And of course, like I am really not a big fan of resurrecting characters who clearly should be dead. But in this case, it really worked out for the better because I do think that Maul in the future gets so much better, gets a really good character. Also, Sam Witwer, the voice actor in the future, not the same as this one. Peter Serafinowicz does it in this movie, But in the future, Sam Witwer really gets a good feel for the character, how to act him out. So I eventually was happy that they brought him back. But based on this
You
movie, I was just like, how the hell
you
did they bring
you
him back?
you do have to question a lot about Zabrak biology.
Yeah,
When it's like he lost his, and
bottom
let me go through
half.
all this. He lost his entire bottom half. That's his
Yeah,
ass, his legs, his dick, if he has one.
yeah.
Like he needs those things to pee and poop. And somehow he just survived on rage for at least 10 years, if not more, before
What was
his
about
brother found him.
11 or 12 years by the time that Savage finds him.
He
So
somehow survived 11 or 12 years with no bottom half
he
and just a
also he
bunch of.
also managed to move planets for some reason. Like despite falling down the entire shaft on Naboo, he managed to find himself on a different planet. I don't know how that happened.
I mean, it's one of those. It's going to be one of those mysteries in Star Wars, unless they want to maybe devote like a short
Yeah.
to explaining how that happened and how he ended up there. But anyway, so
Anyway, I wanted to get my piece in about this lightsaber fight because the thing is, it's actually not necessarily the choreography that I have an issue with. I think the choreography is really good in this movie. I'm not going to discredit their work for that because, of course, they spent a lot of hours to make sure that the choreography looked great. It's more so the writing of the characters having a lightsaber fight. In the original trilogy, the first lightsaber fight we see is between former master and apprentice. They have a history together. There's a reason that they should fight at that point because they have built up a hatred towards each other. They feel like they should have one final fight to duke it out, and Vader wins. There you go. In the second movie, Empire, the fight is between Luke and Vader. Luke wants revenge on Obi-Wan, and also wants revenge because he knows who Vader is, or at least he thinks he knows who Vader is. Then, of course, at the end we have the reveal. What I love about the lightsaber fights in the original trilogy is also the amount of dialogue that there is. They talk it out while fighting. They say things to each other, like because they have a feeling that they are fighting for a certain reason, and they want to try to talk it out as well as fight. This movie, Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan have never met before they fight. The only little meeting that they had was the fight that Qui-Gon and Maul had on the planet Tatooine. They have no reason really to fight, with the exception of one line that Maul says, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi, at last we will have revenge. That means that there is probably some built-up anger on his side as a Sith. Now, sure, they fight because, of course, the Sith and the Jedi are enemies since the history of time, but I would have liked a little bit more of a personal motivation for them to actually have a fight, for them to actually know each other, and maybe also have a little bit of dialogue going on, because there's no dialogue throughout the entire fight. Maul doesn't say a single thing, and vice versa, at all, at any point, that is my issue why I don't love the fight. I still think the choreography is great and the score, Duel of the Fates, is great, but that is one of my reasons why I don't absolutely love it like a lot of other people. And as I said, everyone loves this fight. I am in the minority, so if you like this fight, you are definitely in the majority of people who loves it, and please, by any means, love it. But I just wanted to get it out why I'm not the biggest fan of it.
I'm just trying to figure out that, like, if your issue is they weren't saying enough to each other, if anything at all, and this, like you just said, you also said yourself, it doesn't feel very personal. Well, that's probably why they're not saying anything to each other, because they don't really know each other.
No,
So,
but
so it's like, what would they say
I
to each other if they were to talk
no,
things out in this fight?
I know, but that's my point of like how this movie, in my opinion, should have been restructured a little bit to the point where uh, we would have some scenes between them, because truth is, actually, Vader and Luke have never actually met. Well, That is not true, by the way. They have met in canon, but that was a comic that was released later. But Vader, in terms of the original trilogy, the first time that Vader and Luke meet is on Bespin. But at that point, Vader has some information about who Luke is. Luke has some information about who Vader is because he talked that out with people. And I have the feeling that, if you were able to do that there, you should have been able to figure something out here to at least make sure that they knew something about each other and they would be able to say something. Also, because Qui-Gon is a green lightsaber user. Now, the explanation doesn't hold true anymore thanks to the fact that Knights of the Old Republic is not canon. But in Knights of the Old Republic, the explanation is if you have a green lightsaber, you're a Jedi consular, and if there's a fight, if you're in a fight and there's a break in the fight, a Jedi consular is the type of person, especially like the moment that the force field closes on them. Why doesn't he try to say something? Why doesn't he try to talk it out, like try to figure out anything about Maul? No, he just sits there. I think that would have made it at least a bit more interesting,
I think you have to chalk it up to the fact that when these two first encountered each other on Tatooine,
Yeah.
Maul threw the first strike. The first strike. He didn't have anything to say to him to explain why he was attacking him. He was just like sword ignited, swinging for the fences. And so I think at this point, Qui-Gon realizes nothing I say is going to change this guy's mind. This is a Sith. I can tell by the red lightsaber and by the dark energy surrounding this motherfucker. And he's just going to try and destroy us no matter what we say to try and talk him off the ledge. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about Maul. The more we see him, the more we realize that he struggles to evolve past a certain point in his life. Like he is so stuck in this one spot of just like trying to be successful and constantly being angry at the galaxy for not being successful or for things that are holding him back from being even more successful, that he can't move beyond that. And in this sense, Maul is very much a beast. He is a beast meant to be let off his leash and just attacked. And
that's
so
true. There is actually a pretty decent comic now in canon that takes place just before the Phantom Menace, where Maul is very much enraged at the Jedi. He really wants to get the Jedi. He wants to kill them. And in that comic, he kills a Jedi Padawan. Like it takes him a while to actually find a Jedi Padawan to fight that Padawan, and then at the end he kills the Padawan. And then at the end of that, he's reflecting, and he's like, that actually wasn't satisfying. And then he thinks he needs more Jedi, but the truth is that is never really gonna quench his thirst, I feel. And he's always just gonna have the issue of wanting to kill Jedi, and it's never gonna be enough for him. And I think that comic is actually a bit of a better explanation as to why he does what he does in this movie.
So we're getting a little bogged on the context of this lightsaber battle. There's still some things we need to cover before we reach the end of the movie, and I'd like to go get some soup. So, so to just summarize everything else that has happened after, I mean, we've established that Darth Maul has been bisected and has fallen down into the well, if you will. Obi-Wan comforts Qui-Gon in his final moments of living. Qui-Gon is like, promise me you will train that boy. And Obi-Wan's like, yes, sir. Yes, master. It'll probably end badly for us all, but yes, master. He doesn't actually say that, but we can tell there's some trepidation in his acceptance of that. Anyway, meanwhile, elsewhere, the Gungans have kind of been put into a bad spot, but lo and behold, Anakin managed to fly the starfighter with R2-D2, the N1 starfighter he was sitting in all that time. He managed to fly it up into space, got into the spacecraft where the battle droids were being activated from, blows up the engines, from the inside, destroys the ship and therefore deactivates all the droids.
And as he's
Viceroy,
flying out, he says, "Now this is pod racing."
yes, which is kind of the a play on words of the title of this podcast episode, which is
Mm-hmm.
not shown here. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the title says, "Now this is podcasting," which I was very proud of myself
By the
for that
way,
title.
I can actually see it at the bottom of the Twitch thing.
Oh, yay. It works. But anyway, that happened. The Gungans are safe. The battle droid ship has been knocked out by Anakin. And Newt Gunray fell for the Queen decoy situation.
Yep.
And sent all his droids out of the room, leaving Padme there to hold Gunray at gunpoint and be like, let's write a new treaty, shall we? And so all is one, and we cut to the now
Qui-Gon's
Chancellor
funeral?
Palpatine. Well,
Oh,
not yet. We cut to the now Chancellor Palpatine landing on Naboo, celebrating his election victory. He's talking to the Queen. I have no idea if this is Padme or Sabe underneath that makeup because they're still using the accent. This system, now that I think about it,
Padme. That is
okay,
Padme.
but she's still using the accent. So this system is very effective in that it's causing confusion as to who's who, which if you were an outsider of Naboo, you'd want that confusion to work so that you never kill the right person. But anyway, we see, and also the Chancellor is like, I'm going to watch your career with great interest, Anakin Skywalker.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Foreshadowing. Very heavy foreshadowing of
Very
what's to
obvious
come.
foreshadowing.
So we now which came first, the funeral or the conversation between Obi-Wan and Yoda?
Conversation.
Okay, so Yoda's like, we grant you the rank of Jedi Knight, but we do not appoint Anakin Skywalker as your apprentice.
No,
5 seconds later.
No, actually, he's like, you will be a Jedi and you will get Anakin as your Padawan, but I don't agree with it. He's like, but I don't agree. And then, it's like Yoda doesn't want him to, and then Obi-Wan is like, I will do it anyway, even if I have to go against the Council's wishes. And then Yoda's like, okay, we discussed it. We're gonna give you permission. So,
which by the way, maybe if he had taught Anakin outside of the Jedi Order, that would have probably worked out better for the galaxy as a whole. Because then he wouldn't have to deal with the attachment bullshit. He wouldn't have had to hide the fact that he had a wife and a child on the way. That will make that 2 children. So like, and also Obi-Wan could have gotten with Satine, and we could have just had. They could have just had happy. Yeah, one happy family.
But Nico, the original trilogy was made before these movies, so they all had to go to that anyway. You know.
Star Wars, what if? Make it happen someday. But anyway, so we by the way, that's another thing. That's a point I forgot to mention that eventually we will get to. Is Star Wars is about family. It's about the family you're born to, but also the family you find. And this is Anakin's new family that he's found. Now that he's been removed from the family he was born to. And it's all about like, can he make the most of that family he has? So far, he appears to be, but that will obviously change as time goes on. Anyway, we get to the funeral. Everyone is sad because Qui-Gon was a cool guy. It's also Liam Neeson, and you hate it when Liam Neeson dies and stuff. But they're talking about which was killed.
I didn't hate it when he died in Batman Begins. To be fair.
Oh well, he was the villain there, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're talking about which came first, the chicken or the egg. Which did we kill, the Sith Lord or the Sith Apprentice? And they're trying to figure out which is which. Yes, we know they killed the apprentice, but no one else knows for sure. And then we get that celebration at the end where they hold up the glowing orb. We see all the Jedi and all the main characters of the story but also we have that one black Jedi that's not Mace Windu that was kind of like his stand-in because Windu had probably other better places to be. Um, um, anyway, so we're getting
By the
that
way,
celebration.
there's something that I only learned yesterday when rewatching this movie, because I was actually looking for, I was looking through the soundtrack of the Phantom Menace, and then I get to the theme called The Parade, which is the end parade theme celebration. And I learned that that is actually a massive, sped up, major key version of the Emperor's theme. It's very difficult to hear, honestly, but John Williams did intentionally make the parade theme at the very end an uplifting version of the Emperor's theme. And I was like, son of a bitch.
You know what? That actually makes a lot of sense to me because, in a sense, this is still Palpatine's victory.
It
It's
is.
just it's just shown in a different light because
Yeah.
it's like he just became chancellor. Like corruption may be an end in a little bit from what everyone seems to think. Naboo has been unified between the surface world and the Gungans, and we got Boss Nass holding up that weird glowy static orb and yelling "Peace!" like Paul Bearer holding up the Undertaker's urn. That's a wrestling reference that Case will not get, but other people
Yeah.
might. And then we cut to the credits as everyone is smiling and happy, and that is the Phantom Menace. So it's a fun movie to watch. It's a very enjoyable movie. But and we roast it with love if we were roasting it at all. But
Look,
like
the thing, I personally have never had that much issues with the Phantom Menace. I have seen the Red Letter Media review of it, of course. They make a lot of good points. I will admit that, like in terms of criticism for the movie, they make good points. But there are some things that I honestly don't really care about, that I honestly never thought that were an issue. I addressed a couple of those things that are I said in the review or in the discussion that, like, there are some points that some people bring up as an issue, and I never consider that an issue. I just don't think it is. I find this movie very watchable. The pod race is awesome. That's probably my favorite scene. And I think there's still plenty to enjoy in this movie, more so than to hate. If you want to hate on this, okay, you can do that, but it's honestly a bit pointless to me. Like, I try to just enjoy what I like about Star Wars, and I think there are still plenty of very good messages in this movie, and a lot of things that, like, this movie started a lot of things that are very important in terms of the galaxy, what we now have also in Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi. That is stuff that I really love. So so I also really respect what this movie spawned. Maybe even more so what the movie is by itself.
and I like this movie simply because of the risks it took, the things it tried.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Like it tried to introduce a lot of new stuff to Star Wars that we aren't as familiar with, and in some cases it knocked it out of the park, and others not so much. But it's still in an enjoyable portrayal that it's managed to withstand the tests of time, and the things that were there made their way back into other adaptations of Star Wars in just maybe a different context or an updated context to make them age better. And so, like, yeah, this movie is very fun. This movie is very fun. I like pod racing. I like this lightsaber battle. I like the way they fought in it. I like the fact that we're getting examples of how different planets live, different cultures. Again, we're talking about an electoral monarchy in the surface world, and we're talking about an entire underwater civilization right below it.
Yep.
We're talking about how. Oh, by the way, that's one thing we forgot to mention is Newt Gunray got the Trade Federation got their routes taken away. like all their power was stripped, at least in terms
Yeah.
of like their Republic connections, all got stripped as a
Thing
result
is
of all
that
the.
for some reason it seems like the Trade Federation is very um, like fucked over at the end of this movie. But then in Attack of the Clones, Newt Gunray is still in power, and actually the Trade Federation is doing well. They're making ships for the war that is to come, and the Trade Federation is actually doing very well. So it's like nothing happened apparently in the 10
You,
years between this and the Attack of the Clones.
no,
Doesn't
you
make
know
any
what
sense.
happened? They joined the Separatists. Like the
Yeah,
Separatists
yeah, that's
have.
true.
We find out in future media that the Separatists have their own Senate body as well, and
No,
the
that's
Trade
true.
Federation kind of became in line with them. So like they traded one Senate for another, and they managed to maintain power that way. That's essentially what happened. But
Yeah.
anyway, basically, we enjoy Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, and we hope you do too. I'm trying to keep these conversations positive, and even with the negative stuff, I try to put like a humorous spin on them, just so just so it can be enjoyable for you. Um, Also, I'm tired, and my ADHD medication wore off like several hours ago. So there's that. So let's get to plugs and let's get the hell out of here. So, Case, where can the good people of the internet find you?
I don't have a whole lot of plugs. Like, this is my Twitter handle. Just follow me here.
Okay, first, you can find this podcast on youtube.com/at reconnecting with the force. That's the shortcut to how you can get there. Twitch.tv/reconnecting with the force, or at reconnect force on Twitter. There's also a Facebook page if you want to check that out. Just type in reconnecting with the force and it'll come up in the search bar at some point. As for me, you can find me at Nico Furioso on Twitter. That is my wrestling name. Or twitch.tv/Nicholas Starhart on Twitch with there's no H in the Nicholas part. I would change the handle there, but since I'm an affiliate, there's a lot of paperwork that would need to be filled out, and I don't want to do that. And in terms of things that are happening, there's so many overlays here that I got to find them all. But let me see here. No, that's not the right one.
Which one are you looking for?
Okay. So this is all this is all wrestling stuff coming up that I want to promote. Firstly, tomorrow at the Uniontown Mall in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, former Ring of Honor Women of Honor champion, the first and longest reigning person to hold that belt, Sumi Sakai, will be running a seminar, and that will be the lead-in to Rise Pro Wrestling's 6th anniversary special, main evented by PB Smooth, defending the Rise Grand Championship against Edric Everhart. Also, Sumi Sakai will be teaming with AJ Alexander in a mixed tag team match versus Laura Lovelace and Christian Noir. And then next week, December 17th, live from, it'll be live for those in attendance, and then it'll show up on YouTube a few weeks later. The Enjoy Odyssey Battle Royal being held at Mr. Small's Theater in Millville, Pennsylvania. MV Young is defending his Enjoy Championship against GCW Hall of Famer Lufisto, and everyone else will be entering a Rumble-style Battle Royal with, I believe, a shot at a championship on the line in that battle royal. So go check that out as well. That's everything that's happening in the world of Pennsylvania wrestling that I'm affiliated with for the remainder of the year. I'll let you know when things are coming up for January. But until then, I still need to think of an outro, but this has been Reconnecting with the Force. That's Case. I'm Nico, and may the Force be with you again, always. Bye.